Welcome to Brick by Brick, Building Wealth Through Homeownership. I am Kim Von Doren, your realtor.
And I'm your banker, Ed Marco. All right, so today we're going to talk about pretty much the three stages of home ownership, or, most people throughout their lives have different needs. And one of the worst things you can do, in my opinion, is hold onto a house too long that's no longer useful to you. Would you agree?
I would agree. I think the idea here is to talk about kind of the three homes you might own in your lifetime based on where you are in your life, right? Is that more or less what we're going to discuss?
That's my thought process is.
Yes, because sometimes you end up in the house you started out in.
Well, you can.
Yeah.
You can. That's kind of actually happens to a lot of people. But, so my thought process, what I've seen most people go through in their lives is everybody. Let me start again there with that. Everybody that I talk to when they're young is looking for their forever house. And there's really no such thing as a forever house. So you generally have a starter home, which is the first home that you can buy, usually smaller, something reasonably priced. And that's where you learn how to be a homeowner.
Yeah.
Really, it's like a practice house.
Yes. Oftentimes you're potentially a single individual. You may be a couple. So that's usually your starter home. It's just you or you and a partner.
Correct. Yes. And then as life kind of gets with you and your partner, you might have children, or maybe you don't have children, but your careers expand and you want to move into a larger house. Most people, it's because of family. Their family starts to grow. So they quickly realize that the starter home is too small, and they end up in a 3 or 4 bedroom home with multiple bathrooms, generally single family dwellings a lot of the time. And they're pretty expensive. That's kind of like the what most people will call in their lifetime the big house. They live in that big house and they raise their family, and then the family grows up, right? Kids go to school or college, they get married and they go away, and now it's you and your partner, or maybe just you alone again, and you're in this great big house. And that's where I see a lot of people make a big mistake.
And I think that's probably what we'll talk the most about in this conversation, because I think both you and I see that as a lender and as a realtor. We see folks who are in a big house or are in a 2-story house, and maybe it would benefit them to be in a 1-story home at a certain point in their life. And so I would venture to guess the majority of our conversation will be focused on when to make those transitions. So let's start by asking this question. Let's say the individual or the couple has bought their starter home. That's probably a 2 to 3 bedroom home, right?
Usually, yes.
Yeah. And it's going to be a moderately priced home. Usually we're going to use the word moderately, because if we use real numbers, we'll really date this podcast. Because by next week, right? Could be.
Right. Yeah. Oh.
But yeah, so it's usually a pretty moderately priced home.
Correct.
Kind of conservative in size, not oversized necessarily. And that's where you get started with your life, and you start to build foundations in careers and, whether or not you're going to have a family or not, and things like that. And then comes we're expanding, whether it's financially or familially, we are expanding. So now we're going to move on to the second house, which is the one that you talked about, which is the bigger house, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, big yards, pools, and that's going to be a significantly more expensive home. I'd venture to say, and you tell me if you agree, 2 to 3 times the price of your first house.
Typically, yes. Yeah.
So that's a pretty significant home. And that becomes often some folks' biggest asset.
Right. For almost everyone, really, that house becomes your largest asset. And it's imperative that you use it, in my opinion, that you use that asset wisely. And one of the things that you need to know is when it's time to sell it.
Right.
and liquefy that asset and move into a smaller home. I see so many people in their later years of life still living in that grand home, and it's a couple or a single person, and they run into financial difficulty maintaining the home, paying the taxes on the home, taking care of the yard and the swimming pool, or all these kind of things require that you're physically fit to do. They can't do it anymore, so they need to pay somebody to do that. And I will ask them, why are you holding onto that house? Oh, well, the grandchildren like to come here for Christmas. And it just infuriates me because the heck with the grandkids. You need to do what's best for you so that you have, they call them your golden years. Let's let them be golden. So you really should know when it's time to let go of that large home and move into a smaller home, very similar to your first home.
Right.
Probably one floor is best for most people. You're going to be able to liquidate that large asset probably for half of what you get from that large asset, buy a much smaller, cozier, easy to maintain home, or maybe even a condo, where you have zero maintenance,
Right.
and live comfortably for the balance of your life.
Yes. So one of the things that I've noticed is folks like to, what you were saying, they want to keep that house somehow or another in their family. But one of the ways you can do that is transfer ownership of that property to your children,
Correct.
right? That's a way to keep that house in the family. If your grandkids or your kids love that house that they grew up in, then maybe they could buy that home from you, and now you can transition to a home that's overall just easier for you. I think that I see folks also in this situation. I will tell you that when I was a consumer credit counselor a million years ago, I would get phone calls from elderly people who were desperate to hang on to these homes that they had, that they could not afford the property taxes. They couldn't afford the oil bill. That was always a big problem. They're living off of $2,000 a month Social Security. They have pharmaceutical bills and all of this other stuff, but they wanted to leave the house to their kids. So, as much as this message or this podcast is geared towards the people who we want to encourage to make that move, I also want the folks who are someone's children, who are watching their parents live in a home that you're either helping them maintain or helping them take care of in some way, that you also let them off the hook. That you consider encouraging them to do the thing that's in their best interest and not yours anymore.
Right.
Because you're grown now and they're older and everything becomes more difficult. Mowing the grass, doing home maintenance, paying for a new roof, all of those things become more difficult as you get older. We tend to peak out with income, right? So
Right.
you tend to reach a peak almost right before you retire.
Right. Right.
So you want to kind of let folks get there. But when you see the writing on the wall, you see your parents aging, you see them losing capabilities, you know when they're going to retire, give them the grace of saying, you don't need to do this for me. You need to do what's in your best interest.
Right. So I think I heard this best from a friend of mine when he was talking to his mother about doing exactly this. She was, oh, we have so many memories here. I don't want to leave the house because of all the memories, all the memories, all the memories. And he literally said to her just like this, Mom, it's time for somebody else to enjoy this space and have those memories.
That's
Get a
so
little choked up thinking
sweet.
about it.
Aw.
But it is the reality of it. That's a beautiful space for a large family. Let another large family enjoy it.
Right. That's very sweet. Yes. And so we're you and I are both see people in that moment where, now we're installing, seats that are electronic that take you from one story to another because you can't do stairs anymore, right?
Right.
And there is a moment. This is the moment. When is that moment, Ed?
Yeah.
When is the moment? When is the right time to move from the bigger house into the smaller house?
Right. So you really don't want to wait for that to be the moment. When you look at those stairs and you say, I'm going to spend thousands of dollars to put a stair elevator in, you've passed your moment. I think for most people, it needs to be a financial decision, and financial decisions are best made in advance. You plan it, and you sit down with your spouse, or you look yourself in the mirror and you say, in 2 years, I'm going to retire. It's time to get rid of this large house and buy my retirement home now, because it'll be easier while you're working. It's easier to move when you can still physically move.
Right.
It's very difficult to move when you can't physically move anymore. So you want to do that ahead of time. My wife and I moved into the little home that we're in now, or we call it the bungalow, like 7 years ago, when the kids were gone for real. When we knew the kids were gone for real, everybody's all out, everything is ready to go. It was time. We're like, we don't want to live in anything other than a very small home that we're comfortable with. We made the decision to do it when we did it. Now, probably not going to retire for a few more years, but I'm enjoying my golden years kind of ahead of time. A lot of people where I work, they know I constantly in vacation mode, because that's all I can think about. That's all I can
I'm
think
the
about.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not an age thing. There isn't a certain age when
No.
you should suddenly move into the one-story home or the smaller home. You and I mean, we moved into our smaller home because we did a whole podcast on the
Yeah.
size of our very small homes.
Right, right.
And, I moved there, goodness, I moved there in 2012. So that's 13 years ago I moved there.
Yeah.
I would have been 40 something when we moved there.
Right.
And you the same. You'd
Yeah.
have probably been what? You don't have
I was
to
in
tell
my
your
I was in my
age.
late
Yep,
50s,
yep. So, you have to know when is the right time for you.
Mhm.
But like you said, if you're thinking about installing something to move you up and down the stairs that's electronic, maybe it's time to go if you haven't gone already. Because yeah, you really take that equity, turn that into something, buy or build yourself a one-story home. I know they're hard to come by because they are the most popular. However, it is something I think that you'll be grateful that you did,
Right.
because you only have to go through the pain of leaving that other house once,
Right.
right?
Well, and here's the thing too. It's always the same excuse: is the family, the family, the family. They all come here. They all come here, and that's all. That was well and good when you were the mom and the dad. Now you're the grandma and dad.
Right.
It's time not just to pass on your knowledge, it's time to pass on the responsibility. Let someone else be in charge of the holidays.
Right.
Again, you're supposed to be going into your golden years. Enjoy it. I
Yeah.
mean, if you enjoy cooking, go help them cook.
Mhm.
If you enjoy cleaning, go help them clean. But do it at their house.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
mess up their house. It's time for them to have the fun of doing all of those things in their bigger house. You had your starter home, you had that big family home. It's time to go into the ender home or the other start. It's a new start. It's a smaller starter home again. So those three homes,
Yes.
But like I said, always, almost in every podcast, I end up saying, be prepared. If you're prepared for anything, you're prepared for everything.
Right.
You need to be prepared when it's time to do that. So
I
be
agree.
prepared.
Yeah. And I think most people are gonna own, probably some people will own more, some
Yeah.
people will own one.
Yeah.
But I think the trend shows that people tend to be in about 3 houses.
Yeah.
And so I think if we are just a little bit more proactive about planning our future in that way
Mhm.
and being thoughtful about it, and maybe you'll decide, I want to die in my big house. Okay, go ahead and die in your big house if that's what you want. Just make sure you have planned for that as well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you're financially well off to do that, and you don't mind paying everybody to take care of stuff, that's great too. But again, that's up to you. I would never want to do it.
Yeah.
I would much rather prefer
Plus,
to.
I want to be able to enjoy myself, and enjoying myself is not cutting the lawn.
Right.
It is not weeding my flower beds all the time. That's not my joy. My joy is vacation,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like to you,
Yep.
or, maybe holidaying is spending time with your family at their house, or, it's cheaper to buy a pool membership than it is probably to maintain that house with a pool.
Yeah.
So, you know, and maybe don't want to be around the public, but there are other ways to sort things out. And so I would just say be creative, be thoughtful, and be open
Yep. Yeah. And be prepared.
and be prepared.
Yep. But that's it. The 3 stages usually: starter home, family home, and then something for your golden years. So you go, small, large, and then back to small again.
Right.
And that's typical.
Yes, I hope this was helpful to people trying to plan their home buying over the years.
Yes. I'm Ed Marco.
And I'm Kim Von Doren.
You have been listening to Brick by Brick. Be sure and subscribe, post questions for future episodes, or comment. This is a Super Squirrel production, Super Squirrel Studios, Stony Creek Mills, Pennsylvania.